Hello, everyone. Welcome to another live guest interview within Mindful Journey. So delighted to have you here with us today, and I'm excited to bring you our guest, Don Kurz. Don, as you see in his digital background there, is the recent author of this amazing book, Do the Hustle: Life Lessons from Studio 54, the Championship Lacrosse Field, and the Boardroom. For those of you who might be familiar with Don's story or seen the bio we sent in advance, he certainly has a unique and unconventional path. What I love about his writing and having followed some of his outreach or output, I should say, on LinkedIn over the years, I've been connected with him for quite some time. He has a humility about him that you'll undoubtedly feel today. Although he's had success, as society may deem it, in the business world, having amassed, I believe, a net worth of up to $50 million, and then to his own admittance, lost that overnight to some extent. And we'll learn more about that today. He's taken a company public on Nasdaq. He's been a partner at a massively successful consulting firm. He remains as the executive board chair at a leading creative agency, Omelet, and again, a recent author. I could go on and on about his accolades. We'll certainly learn more about his story, but I trust that we'll all benefit greatly and deeply from not only Don's humility to share vulnerably, but these lessons that he's accrued throughout his life from athletics, from business, and just the humanity piece, as I know he's gone through some personal challenges as well. With all of that, Don, thank you again for accepting the invite to be with us in Mindful Journey. Looking forward to our conversation.
Well, thank you so much for having me. And as I noted prior to the start of the recording, I've been a big admirer of what you do and the vision that you've laid out. This is very much needed and very much welcomed.
Thank you so much. Grateful for that. For our audience who may not be familiar with Studio 54, of course, it's a iconic New York City a nightclub, for lack of a better word. I hope I'm not misenunciating. I don't even have all that much familiarity. But would you give us go back to the beginning of your life and kind of give us a feel for what led you into that, and then a brief overview of your career leading up until now?
Well, again, thanks for having me, and let me see if I can be as succinct as possible. But I was born in New York, Queens, New York. Those of you who are familiar with all five New York City boroughs, Queens, kind of one of the ones you don't think of as much. A blue collar town called Bayside, and when we were five, we moved right over the Nassau County border between Queens and Long Island, New York, to a town called Elmont. Attended public schools, had a very happy childhood, very involved in athletics, particularly football and lacrosse. We had championship teams in both, and I was honored to be elected captain of both those teams and subsequently to the Elmont Memorial High School Hall of Fame. I was recruited to play lacrosse at a number of schools, but Johns Hopkins, which people either know as being they say you're either a lacrosse player or a doctor if you go there. And fortunately for society, I'm not a doctor. Um, but I was a reasonable lacrosse player, and that was my dream school as an athlete, and was fortunate enough to be on a national championship Division I team my freshman year, which was Hopkins' first in the NCAA playoff era, their first championship. They had plenty in the pre-NCAA era. Um, and I'm going to get back to Studio 54. The way I ended up pivoting, if you will, to become a dance instructor and then a regular uh, nightclub hopper, if you will, was my junior year. I got a very severe ACL and MCL knee injury. And that was back in the era where there was no arthroscopic surgery. There was not even an MRI. There was just a very early in the 70s prior to an MRI becoming available. So the rehab was much less sophisticated, if you will, and the ability to do a quick surgery like you could do today and get you on the path to recovery just really wasn't there. The surgery to repair that was quite extensive, and you'd be out a minimum of a year. So doctor and trainer thought that perhaps they can put me in a cast for 2 months and then see if I can come back because this injury was at the very beginning of the season for the playoffs 3 months later. And my first practice back trying to recover, I ripped both those ligaments again.
Mm,
So talk about you have to picture me as a whatever 20 or 21-year-old. My entire life was defined by sports, and then it was quite clear that my career was over. I'm not a very big guy, so my entire game was speed and agility, and that was just, reduced.
sure.
Um, Purely coincidentally, the world of disco is emerging, and uh, as they say, it's better to be lucky than smart. I, being from New York and Johns Hopkins, as you know, is in Baltimore, I would go up frequently now that I wasn't playing sports anymore to and somehow fell into this nightlife and the world of disco dancing, uh, dating a young lady who was a dance instructor. And I started teaching dancing during my senior year at college, and then I got admitted to Columbia University's MBA program, and I started teaching dancing on the side when I was getting my MBA, which was not very good for my grades, to say the least. But one of my students was in the fashion business, and he had a ticket, his company did, to this hottest new club called Studio 54. And for those of your listeners who might not be familiar, it was kind of a once in a lifetime club that was only open for 2 years because they were not paying taxes as it as it turned out. So the feds closed them down, which made it even more iconic because only being open for 2 years, they didn't ever lose their kind of peak on the mountain,
Sure.
if you will. So I became a regular at Studio 54, teaching dancing and hobnobbing with some of the big names of that era and current era, people like Mick Jagger and Andy Warhol and Jackie Onassis. Not that I was hanging out with all these people, but I was rubbing
Sure.
shoulders, if you will, with them. So that was purely, and what's relevant perhaps to this session that we're having is the lowest point of my life, again, as an athlete whose entire life was defined by sports, getting this injury, which I was saying, why me? Why not Adam? Why not someone
Yeah.
else? It's not fair. And what am I going to do? And somehow I was able to pivot to this new thing and became very popular as a dancer and opened up a whole lot of new doors for me. And
Yeah.
so that's how Studio 54 came about. It's
Yeah.
being in the right place at the right time.
Yeah, that's fascinating, and I did not know it was only open for 2 years. That speaks to, like you mentioned, kind of its iconic nature, its exclusivity, and the fact that it was only there a short time. Don, you said something that was interesting to me, and I took notes so I wouldn't forget here that your identity was defined by lacrosse, and I think that's common, or by athletics, if you will.
Yeah,
And I think that's common for a lot of people, even as they grow older outside of college, they become attached to this identity of who they think they're supposed to be, what it is that makes them up, their titles, entrepreneur, CEO, athlete, whatever it may be. You've had so many titles throughout your life, and I'm going deep right off the bat here. What has given you the courage to not attach to one thing, to continually try different things? Although you saw yourself as Don the athlete, you were still, although in the right place, courageous enough to embrace something that you were, quite frankly, a beginner in. Is there something you can point to that would allow our listeners to hopefully find inspiration to break free of their titles as well?
sure. Well, in all candor, reflecting back, I just think it's ego and insecurity. And of course, that was externally uh, achieved because one bestows an athlete or whatever title on you in terms of what they view you as. And I think the desire to be very good at something was always a flame in me. And there's benefit to that. Of course, you work hard, and then there's also risk, if you will, because you can't keep being at the top of something indefinitely. There's always another person, or there's another craze, or something that's going to happen. So I think the dancing, I was a drummer growing up, so I guess I had some rhythm. And again, I fortunately met this young lady who is an instructor. You can't make this stuff up at New York Hustle Inc., a dancing
Yeah.
school that I just met randomly. And the way I became evolved from a beginner to somebody who was viewed as kind of at the top of their game during the disco era is because I would take the lessons I would learn from her from New York, and I was a good dancer, but not certainly there were plenty of better dancers. And in Baltimore, nobody had ever heard of disco or the hustle. So I would take them in my senior year. I would learn the steps, and I would go down and put up flyers at all the local colleges and teach dancing. And to them, I was John Travolta, who actually wasn't popular then, but the concept of wow, this guy knows stuff, just if you will, the one-eyed man in the land of the blind. And then I just got my, confidence and then translated when I went to Columbia back to New York, and then became certainly not the best dancer of the year, but I was good. And fortunately, I knew a lot of people, so that I got some prominence from that. So I just wanted to be the best at something. So
Right.
once athletics was done, then dancing. And of course, as I say in my book, I wasn't going to be a dancer getting degrees from Johns Hopkins and Columbia. You don't become a dance instructor. I guess you could, but that's probably better off not spending the money on those degrees.
Sure. Yeah. What did your friends think? Particularly the MBA program, because Columbia, of course, a very prestigious business school and well known, and considered an elite institution. Of course, I assume most folks who were immersed in their MBA were either working at a Goldman Sachs or something part time, full time, and doing their MBA part time. And here you were doing your MBA as a dance instructor. What did people think? And then I guess the deeper question beyond that is, how do you separate this care from what others are thinking to ensure that you don't alter the passion that's inside? You speak a lot about passion, I know, in the book, and having that courage, that I think, like the gut algorithm you speak to. I know that's
Yes.
a little off topic, but I'm getting long-winded on this. Like, two questions: what did your peers, colleagues think? And then how, to our listeners, can they be courageous enough to ensure that they stay true to them and not allow the opinions of others to distract them?
Yeah, it's such a great question and such a eternal challenge for many of us, me at the top of the list. Of course, I don't know what everyone thought, but I know there was a small niche that thought it was very cool. And just because who at this school is doing that? And particularly when I became, I had access to Studio 54, which was very hard to get into, the classic velvet rope. They would have thousands of people
Wow.
trying to get in. And, but the majority of people were like, who is this guy? And with some disdain, because you're right, they were largely, I don't know, probably over half the class was finance. And so they're worked at Goldman Sachs or Morgan Stanley somewhere for 5 years, and then they went and got their MBA. I went right from undergraduate to the MBA program. So I was the youngest person in the class with really no relevant work experience. So I was just, I leaned into my former lacrosse brand, if you will, as well as the dancer, just as a way to distinguish myself, because there's no way I could have competed on business merits with any of these folks. So I was just the kind of oddity, and I leaned into it. I just think I was not mature enough to really understand how out of place I really was, which was good. And it was futile to try to get everyone there to respect what I was doing because in their many of their worlds. This guy is just, how the hell did he get in here?
Yeah, yeah,
And I
yeah.
still don't know how I got in.
That's awesome. Well, bring us now to the do the hustle. Why, Don, now did you decide to write this book? What was the motivation behind it? And maybe like one big takeaway that you were hoping for folks to grab from the book itself.
Yeah, I unlike many of your listeners, I would imagine, who might be thinking over the course of their professional life anyway, that, I have a book in me. I really need to get a book out with all good intentions, and I'm sure I have things to say. I was not one of those. I would always think it's cool, but I also would think, wow, that is a lot of work. When would I ever be able to do that? So I got a call, roughly 2 years ago from Forbes, of course, the big business publication, who I guess looks at people's backgrounds on LinkedIn or other places, and they try to target people who might have a good background to take advantage of their publishing platform, which would include books and then being a contributor, to the magazine and blogs and whatever. So they approached me about my potential interest in writing a book under their imprint. And I thought, wow, that's cool, because I'm now not CEO of Omelet. I'm just chair of the board. So I wasn't running the company day to day, meaning I had more time than I would as a full-time CEO. So we did a book plan, which you probably know what it is, but perhaps some of the listeners don't. It's a very detailed outline of what the book would be about, who's the target audience, a full table of contents, um, what the main themes of the book are, or whatever. And at the end of the process, I thought it was well written. They had a writer work with me on it, but I didn't find it to be particularly unique or inspirational. And I had no desire to write a book just for vanity, to say I'm a published author. It would be nice, but it's not really for what. But it got the bug in my head, if you will. And then I just started taking detailed notes about anything that popped up about my background or my insights into life, what I've learned or whatever. And after, I don't know, 3 or 4 months, I had 10, 11 pages of detailed notes. And then I saw this theme emerge of this athletics to dancing to business, that, of course, each of those verticals, there are plenty of people who participate, but not that many that I knew who kind of circled both or all three of those. And I thought that might be a hook to write a book. And I set out not to write a memoir, and this is not a memoir, but just to really tell my life lessons learned through my life story. So if my life story had fun things in it, but it didn't teach anything, it's not in the book. And so I hired an editor at the beginning of the process, because I didn't really know. I can write reasonably well, but I didn't know how to structure a book. So that was helpful. And then it was about an 18-month journey to get from starting the book to getting it published.
Mm, that's amazing. And what did you learn about yourself through that process?
I made a lot of mistakes. I mean, of course, each one you live through, but the magnitude, magnitude for me, of the mistakes. You mentioned the loss of tens of millions of dollars, which unfortunately is accurate, and just other mistakes. I don't want to call my first marriage a mistake, because we had a great marriage, and, like, unfortunately often happens, it ends, and there's a fair cost to it, emotionally, financially, and whatever. And a number of business errors that are some externally driven, because you're out there and making money and running a public company. There are factors during my tenure, like the dot-com crash and 9/11 that happened, and then the WorldCom and uh, uh, some of the other, blow-ups that led to new accounting rules that made it hard for a smaller public company. Those are external, but then decisions that I made that were ego driven and just being thick-headed that I should not have made in retrospect. So I then had to really look in the mirror and say, am I prepared to? Because I don't want to sugarcoat stuff and
Yes.
because then the lessons really get diluted. And am I prepared for people? Wow, this guy is a wacko, or this guy is, uh, whatever. And I was like, yes, at this stage of my life, this is important. And to the extent, and I don't want to sound holier than thou, but the extent people can learn from these lessons, and now I'm in a good place. So it's not like I am,
Sure.
you know, struggling in a minimum wage job. I've fortunately landed in a good place. I would sure like to have that money back, but that that happened. So I can say with confidence, and that's part of the lesson that you can bounce back. You can learn things from your mistakes. You can emerge stronger, if not financially, but just emotionally and physically. And that's really a core theme of the book. And it's something that's fundamental to what you do in your leadership.
Yeah, no, I th what you're so I was as you're saying that I'm nodding and saying yeah that this is right in line with what it is that we're striving to accomplish within Mindful Journey is bringing this vulnerability to the forefront of conversations because we're living in a time, especially now, where people are able to put their highlight reels on social media, be
Right.
it LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, and actually one of the guests we recently had he was a combat veteran, has a very compelling story, but he was sharing like in his neighborhood, one of his neighbors has a Lamborghini and it was just repossessed. And he was like, it was interesting to him to see, and he's in in Boca area in South Florida. So kind of like a known to be a higher
Oh yeah.
end area. And what Ben had mentioned is that it's just a reminder that what we think people are experiencing doesn't always match what they're experiencing.
Oh
So
yeah.
back to you, Don. I personally appreciate the humility, the vulnerability, the humanization of sharing these lessons because it undoubtedly is helping. It will continue to help, and I'm grateful you're sharing your story. If we can go back though to the moment where you learned that, and I'm assuming I think this was during the dot-com crash, if memory serves me. It wasn't in liquid that you had the cash on hand right there. You lost like the 50 million overnight,
Yes.
essentially. Still, it was part of your net worth. The next morning, when you wake up and realize that this is gone, like, how did you cope in those moments and ensure that it didn't turn into something where, sometimes when people face severe adversity like that, they turn to drugs or alcohol, where
Absolutely.
it becomes a life defining situation? What did you do to navigate it?
Just to be clear, there were two times that I lost tens of millions of dollars. One is an opportunity cost in the late 1990s, which was right before the dot-com crash of 2000. The company was doing very well. On paper, my net worth, just with the stock, forgetting any other cash, was well over 50 million. We could have done a secondary offering for your listeners that is you're already public, and then you issue more stock. And that's a time when the founders or the inside investors can also sell stock without hurting the price in the market because an insider is selling. It's a formal offering. And I pulled the offering before we went out, and I was scheduled to sell $10 million of stock in the offering. I still would have had plenty, but that 10 million was just part of the offering to the public. And I saw a forecast weaken and I felt I don't really want to sell stock. Then the stock declines because the forecast doesn't, your numbers deteriorate. People, you'll get sued, but that happens in public companies all the time. But it's just not something I wanted to be part of. And I felt we could recover and then just do the offering when the numbers started to trend better. If I had sold the 10 million and put it into an S&P 500 index fund, that would be worth 150 million today. assuming I just reinvested, just sat there. So that's not losing it, but that's not taking advantage of a very real opportunity I could have done. And then the dot-com crash happened, the year after. So the markets closed, and then 9/11 happened, and then Enron and WorldCom and all those disasters. So the public markets were really bad for 5 years. And then the way I actually lost the net worth was when my public company went bankrupt. I had lost a boardroom coup, not to sound dramatic, but I wanted to take the company private because there's, we weren't selling stock. There was no real need to be public. Some of the board didn't want to, and ultimately I got fired, however, to sugarcoat it. Um, and instead of accepting that reality and then helping the company and then selling my stock, which was still worth probably, I don't know, 25, $30 million at the time, and then getting it back up by being a good board member, I fought that and ensued litigation and proxy fights and stuff that took up a couple of years, lots of personal money. And ultimately, the company, not all from that, I don't think they brought in the right CEO, and the company started kind of deteriorating and it ultimately went bankrupt. And your equity investment in bankrupt companies are almost always wiped out. And then not to mention the turmoil from it being in litigation and the cost of litigation and opportunity costs of not moving on with your life. And that was when they finally, because I won most of the litigation, they went bankrupt. And that's kind of the ultimate trump card. And the path was clear. You will either kind of blow up your life through drugs or alcohol or whatever because it's so unfair and you can't believe this happened to you and you'll never make this kind of money again, and or you just accept the reality of the situation, accept responsibility for your part in it, and embrace what you have to do to recover. And instinctively, and that's where the pointing to my gut here came in, and my gut was telling me, don't get into this litigation. My gut, but I dismiss it because it was telling me something I didn't want to do. And somehow I made that chance. I went on a plane to Washington, D.C. to the primary board member who was on the other side of the litigation and said, I want to drop everything. Let's just settle this. Fortunately, he was a good guy and he said, fine, let's settle it. And I had a big weight lifted off my shoulder, but a very small net worth. And of course, that's impacted my marriage because you're under that kind of financial strain. It's not a great thing. So, and I just accepted that was my situation. And somehow I had faith it will work out.
Mhm.
Wasn't clear at all how. And then I went on a path to try to do that.
Mhm. A word I heard you mention a few times is acceptance, and I really like that. I think that there's power in not pointing fingers. There's power in saying this is my reality. Whether I like it or not, I've got to accept what is to get to what can be. So kudos to you, Dawn, for embracing that and then sharing that with our listeners because I think it's quite powerful. What were those relationships? I think one of the chapters in your book is about, in essence, and I'm gonna you know all of your chapters, I'm sure, but basically being kind to others. In essence, it's like not bring no harm to others. In other words, could you what was the exact chapter if you don't mind? It was something about not being mean to others, essentially.
Right. My phrase that I put, I'm sure others have had some version of this, but was work hard, take initiative, be kind, and trust that things will work out. So one day I just wrote that in a little journal. Um,
Yes.
work hard, which you control, be kind, which you control, take initiative, whatever that being on your podcast, whatever that is, and then trust that things will work out. Now, for some, it's belief in God, for some, it's belief in the universe and fate. But if you do your part, which means you don't, become an alcoholic or you don't sit on the couch and watch Netflix all day and then expect things to happen, because I don't think it works that way. Um, that became my philosophy, and the acceptance of reality is foundational to that because you can't fight it. Wall Street has a term, don't fight the tape. And of course, the ticker tape is an old way that people got stock prices. And when the stock tape was moving against you, you don't even, oh, this is a great company. I don't want to sell at a loss. I met the CEO. They seem to know what they're doing. Don't fight the tape, sell the stock and move on. And don't fight reality. It doesn't work. Again, I was a guy who wanted justice always, and it sounds corny, but it's true. I think many of us are like that. They don't like when things are unfair. They don't like when things are um, unjust. Now, it doesn't mean it's in litigation, but it just in society, like, why doesn't she like me? I'm a good guy, you know. Well, why did Adam get promoted and not me? Where we were all working at the same company, you know, why do they like him better? I mean, it's there's injustice throughout. Why am I not starting on the team? They started this person instead of me, and I'm better. Everyone tells me I'm better, even though they're just saying what I want to hear. It's just full of it, and it becomes like a video game. The monsters are coming at you, and you just don't have enough bullets to shoot them, or whatever happened in a video game.
Yeah.
And you finally, it's so powerful to just let it come at you and accept there's unfairness, accept life isn't a perfect meritocracy all the time, but that if you take a long view, it will work out. And that's
Mhm.
been my experience. People get
Mhm.
devastating medical diagnosis, and somehow they emerge happier and better because of it, because they get find another purpose. You get
Mm.
fired from a job, and then somehow you land in a better place or a happier place. A marriage ends, you find your true soulmate. But it doesn't happen if you fight. It just doesn't. It only happens when you accept that is my reality. That's my medical diagnosis. That's my net worth. That's my, whatever. And then embrace your path forward. It's not just enough to accept and then feel sorry for yourself. You have to embrace the path forward.
Mhm. Mhm. Particularly with those folks who you felt some sort of frustration towards, I'm sure, who are trying to essentially kick you out of your own company, remove you from the CEO role. Um, Question one is, were you able to make amends with them? And if if so, I would love to hear how you went about it. And if not, is it something that you at least tried to seek forgiveness or ask for forgiveness or say that you're at peace with? And I ask this, Don, and maybe this will help in your answer, because I think I see a lot of people who hold on to resentment so deeply that it
Sure.
steals their joy and peace and happiness.
Such
So,
a such a great question. The answer is yes. I can't say that the group of folks are my closest friends now, and it's not simple. It's not other. They don't live near me, and you move on with your life, and yeah, there is that reality that that was a difficult period. But yes, I am cordial with them all. I think if you read the book, you'll see I'm not blaming others. I'm more blaming myself, even though, in reality, I think there was some real unfair stuff going on, not underhanded or malicious, but just different points of views and I think better communication would have been, helped. But yes, I totally am at peace. If I saw any of them, I would say hello and we'd have a drink. There's a chapter, I think it's chapter 15, called "Don't Make Enemies" in the book. And again, you have to, everyone's situation is different, but it's just a better way to live, and find a solution. And, you know, you don't, again, have to be people's best friends, but just there's no point in having animus. You cannot hang out with them, do business with them, but there's just no upside in having enemies.
Yes, I agree. What do you think contributes to this toxicity and angst that can occur inside cultures of organizations and inside society? Quite frankly, you hear family members who don't talk to each other.
Yeah.
Like what is from your vantage point and lived experience, Don? What do you think are some of the key contributing factors to why people who maybe once loved each other now hate each other?
Yeah. I think ego is kind of underpins a lot of that. Um, when you're challenged in some way or somebody doesn't think your opinion, whether it's politics or I've seen it even with sports teams, rabid sports fans. They just the Yankees versus Red Sox or whatever it would be. That to the point where they really are, at loggerheads. And, parents, there's siblings that, they feel the parents like them better, or they favored them, or they inherited more than you did, or something like that. And people, unfortunately, won't step back and evaluate the situation rationally and say, listen, this is my relative. We're blood. And is it really that important to be right about this? And you can respectfully agree to disagree. And just again, you have to trust that even this short-term setback, whether it's an argument or not getting a promotion at work, or that there's a path of why that happened. And if you trust that that path is out there, and maybe it'll take 10 years to see it, but it will work.
Mhm.
Uh, it, it it's very powerful, but I think ego, unfortunately, is an insecurity, which are kind of the same thing, drive a lot of it. And people can't step outside themselves enough. If they've learned to listen to the gut, which I'm pointing to again, which generally knows what to do if you really let it talk to you, and it's somehow, I call it the gut algorithm. There's some black box in there that's factoring in probabilities and risk returns and your physical and emotional health. I don't know how it happens, but I have gotten good at listening to it. And it
Mhm.
almost always knows. And it's the one being, whatever you call your gut, that has your best interest at heart, no matter what.
Mhm. Oh, I love that. Would please, I'd love for you to expound on that, like the idea of this gut algorithm, and then maybe what particularly has allowed you. You mentioned you got good at it. Is there meditation? Is there journaling? Is there sitting in quiet? What has, first of all, maybe if you can expound upon the gut algorithm a little more deeply, what it means, what it is to you, and then how you've gotten good at listening to your gut.
Well, as you know, probably better than anyone, there's definitely a mind-body connection, and one's physical and emotional health are very much uh, intertwined. Um, I've gotten good after being so bad at it of just listening when I'll take just a random example. Let's just say you and I had a phone call, um, and I hung up it was a perfectly fine phone call, and you said whatever we were talking about. But I walked away, I feel a little funny about that. And it's like, well, why? Adam was really nice and he just talked about whatever. And it might, and instead of just dismissing it, because who wants to have a funny feeling in their stomach, particularly when you don't quite know what it is. Now I'll investigate it, not
Mm.
like
Sure,
Sherlock
sure.
Holmes,
Yeah.
but
Well, I hope this
I'll
isn't happening today, Don. I
yeah,
hope
no,
when you
no,
get
no.
off, it's
I'm just picking a random example because it's so obvious. I don't think we would have a conversation like that. So, and maybe, and I'll trace it again. I'm purely making this up to, he made a comment about something, and it wouldn't be you in this case. It would be, I wish I didn't say that.
Mhm.
I wish I looked better when I talked about my public company experience. I wish I painted a little rosier picture versus what I did. And that's the source of my discomfort.
Mhm.
And in that case, I'm using a pretty trivial case. I might call you back and say, Adam, just to be clear, I built that freaking company and, you know,
Yes.
it had a lot of good years. I didn't mention that. And I want your listeners to know I'm not just some wacko who, you know, lost all this money. And maybe that would solve the thing. Or maybe I would say, you know what, he's a smart guy. He probably figured that I did a few good things there. But I would now trace it rather than have this thing. And somehow those funny feelings, they don't go away. They become neck pain. They become an ulcer, perhaps. They become back pain. Um, they make you irritable to your loved ones because you're having this nagging thing. And the gut algorithm, if you listen to it in that case, would have told you, maybe I need to call you back just to be clear. Or
Yes.
that'll happen with a relative, or that'll happen with a colleague at work. You leave a meeting, you have this little uneasy feeling that they might have thought you thought this, or you looked weak, or whatever it is. And my strategy is to find out what is going on. Normally, and this was me most of my life, I would dismiss it because it's unpleasant.
Yes.
And who wants that unpleasant feeling? Particularly if somebody comes up and punches you in the nose, you don't need your gut to tell you something's wrong here. Uh,
Right.
but when something nuanced happens, which is what most things are,
Yeah.
yeah, I use an example. I just did a written interview with a magazine that I just completed, so it's not out yet. But I use the example. You're very familiar with business. You're doing a potential merger with a company, and you have investment bankers and lawyers, and at least I'm told it's called deal heat. People start to get momentum towards closing a deal because the bankers get paid a big success fee, lawyers bill lots of time. There's capital raised after the merger. There's lots of money to go around. Everyone makes their spreadsheets look great because you can make a spreadsheet about how good this merger is going to be because, oh, we're going to cut all these costs and we're going to double our revenue and everything looks great. And you have this funny feeling. I don't think this company is as good as everyone's saying. I think the culture is going to be a risk because that's a company, whatever. They seem just different than our people. And I think, everyone's nice right now, but I think after a year, there's going to be friction. And then is my CFO going to get the job? Is their CFO going to get the job? Because you don't need two CFOs. And but there's so much deal heat that you don't want to say anything, even though your stomach is saying, this ain't going to work out, or we're
Yeah.
overpaying for them. So we're not going to be able to get a return on our investment. And I've done deals when my gut was saying, and they were all wrong. I've done successful deals too, but my gut signaled it. And I didn't want to tell the bankers they were counting their money, you know, that we weren't going to do it, or less cared about the bankers, but my own employees who were excited because you build this thing up. Look at the vision of this thing is going to be great. The public stockholders will love it because you'll make a splashy announcement and stock will go up 10% that day, which is fun. You do a conference call and tell everyone how amazing this is going to be. But your gut was telling you the truth is don't do this deal. And to stand up in that meeting of 15 people and say, we shouldn't do this is very hard. So you subordinate the gut, you do a bad deal, and then you pay for it in every way going forward.
Yes, yes, so much value in that, Don. I'm so glad you gave us a thorough explanation, and I couldn't agree with you more. I think, people often tell me, friends and strangers alike, that I'm like an introspective guy. I'm maybe too deep sometimes to a fault, but I view that as a strength, and it can cause the old paralysis by analysis, right? Where if you're thinking too much, it can cause a lack of decision making. I think leaders need to be decisive decision makers in many occurrences, but I also think that we need to be thoughtful. And I say all this not to bring it back to me, but to kind of pull out what you're sharing is that now you're willing to examine, you're willing to be introspective, you're willing to ask the tough question, and if action is necessary, you take it. Did I gather that right?
It's perfectly said. And you might gather the information and conclude that the risk return or upsetting someone is not worth bringing it up. Just you'll make a
Yep.
judgment call.
Yep.
And the merger and acquisition case, that is you have to bring it up because there's a lot of money at stake
Yep.
and people's jobs and everything else. But in a situation with a family member, it's just not worth bringing that up. But what I find, at least I know the situation. I've learned what I actually feel about that, and I'm making a decision to let it go. You don't
Yes.
have to fight that demon or whatever else, but you're not doing it by burying it. You're doing it consciously.
Yes. Great, great insights. Well, I want to be mindful of our time because I think I promised you an hour, and there's just a few more things that I have in my mind that
Sure.
I want to get to with you. One, I'd like to, I know when I introduced you, I shared with the listeners about you serving as the executive board chair at Omelet, and you had mentioned that you stepped down from the CEO role. You're not running the company, but would you mind sharing with us what led you to the founding of Omelet and what is Omelet? And then what have your lessons been from that company as well?
Sure. Well, I guess omelet, just I'll acknowledge it's a breakfast food, but that's not what this omelet is. But just um, and just for clarity, I'm not the founder of Omelet.
Oh,
I
my
bought
apologies.
no, no,
Okay.
no. Most people, for whatever reason, think that, but I bought a majority stake in it in 2011.
Okay.
So the public company issues started in 2005, and between the litigation they went through roughly 2007. I founded a hedge fund with a partner in 2008, which did well until the financial crisis. If you recall the subprime mortgage and all the other challenges and the market crash. And then I started doing consulting, was introduced to these gentlemen who had founded this company called Omelet. It's a creative agency, advertising and marketing. And they asked me to do some consulting. I ended up joining the board, and the company got into some financial challenges. They were very creative, very capable people, but they didn't know how to run a business, which is a different skill than doing great creative campaigns. So I ended up literally using my last liquidity. That's absolutely true because I had lost all this money prior, and I lost additional millions of dollars in the hedge fund when the markets crashed to take this position. And that's an example of my gut. I was like, you can't use your last few $100,000 for this risky because the company was losing money. I mean, it's just insane. Um, my gut said this is a good move. The company can be turned if you're prepared to make some important decisions about cost and revenue and everything else. That was where my gut said, just do it.
Mhm.
And I literally made the decision, in a day because the company wasn't going to make payroll. So if I didn't fund it, there wouldn't be a company. So I took control of that company. It's again a marketing and advertising agency, and hired some great people, many of which are still with the company. And we turned it around, and it's a very successful agency with big clients like Google and some of the big video game companies and Netflix and Warner Brothers, big in entertainment. Um, so that was, how it worked out for me. Work hard, take initiative, be kind, and then trust that things will work out. And that was a whirlwind between 2005 and then landing at Omelet.
Wow. And so when you took that, it sounds what a big life decision to take your last capital and pour into a business that had so much uncertainty. That takes a conviction in not just the product that you're offering, the services in this case, but your ability as a leader to see this thing through turbulent times. Do you recall like those first maybe 3 to 6 months on what you did? Because there will probably, I assume, Mindful Journey serves the program itself beyond the podcast serves a lot of organizations that have
Yes.
leaders embedded within, and so there's undoubtedly some defined leaders who will hear this, and I think there would be value, particularly for those folks who are maybe trying to lead through some breakthrough change, some like reshaping the culture. What do you recall like in those first maybe three
Yep.
to 3 months or so that you did to turn things around?
First and foremost was looking at the cost structure because that is something you can immediately control. And in a business like any service business, people are your primary, cost, and it's a variable cost. Kind of as cold as that might sound, it's not like a building that you own it until you can sell it. So we reduced cost as a percentage of total, probably 30 or 40% right away. Just, and gave some severance, but our cash was limited. I also remember we had a full-time IT person, which was insane. Person was capable, but this company at that point had 15 people maybe. And so we outsourced all of the IT function. And so we eliminated the fixed cost of a salary, which was a high-priced person, and put it as a variable cost only to the tech that we needed. And then got to work on driving the revenue line because ultimately you can't save your way to greatness. You have to drive revenue. But the first thing was I can immediately control costs and drive that cost structure down. And when you have a big change at a company, a new owner, a new leadership, there's a window you can do big things. People accept cost reduction. Well, there's a new guy here, it's a new company. There's a window. It's much more difficult as a steady state. One day you announce there's going to be layoffs. So I was like, you want to do that and you want to do it once. You don't want to trickle out cost reduction. You want to come in one day and essentially say, of course, you can't commit that this will never happen again, but you say, this is it. I know it's fairly deep. We're going to see this senior, one or two of the founders moved on. It was a big change, but you do it in one communication with a new face as the leader. And then we targeted a number of big accounts where we had relationships. And fortunately, I remember AT&T was a big win early in that era, and Walmart, two, of course,
Yeah,
iconic
sure.
big companies. And once we had that business secured, our run rate was profitable, and then we proceeded on a growth plan. And the company, and of course, we've had our ups and downs, is done very well since.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I love hearing that, and congratulations to you and to the team for having made that turnaround. I do want to go back to your personal story, and we'll perhaps close with this or maybe one more question. you've already shared with us so vulnerably, and for those listening, please, I do encourage you to pick up Don's book, Do the Hustle. You're going to get more insights and more of his full story there. And Don, I'd love for you to share with us at the end where we can find the book, etc. But I want to hear, to your level of comfort, of course, what you did through some of those, like maybe one of your most trying times. And to give context to this question, I think I'd shared this with you in advance of my outreach to you. Every guest that I've interviewed in Mindful Journey, I've asked the same question of what's the most challenging thing you've gone through in your life, and what do you recall having done to get through it? And we're trying to paint a picture that although we all might have different stories and different backgrounds, and some may appear as though they're unbreakable and have it all together. Everyone's faced something. We want to humanize and normalize this shared experience of life. So again, I know you've talked with us about divorce, of losing millions, and maybe though one of those things is your most challenging thing. But again, if you wouldn't mind sharing with us what has been the most difficult thing to your level of comfort, of course, that you've gone through, and then particularly one or two things that you did to get through it.
Yeah, I do think the losing the boardroom coup was the most difficult. I'm not saying rationally you hear my stories and why not that one instead of that? That was the most difficult for me for a couple of reasons. One, it was a terrible ego blow. I mean, I really had built that company, and of course with others, and I had a good business partner for part of that journey. But how can I be? I was the largest common shareholder. There was a preferred shareholder who had super voting rights, which is why I didn't control the board. But it just was such an ego blow and so unjust in my view. And it was a split board, so I had a bunch of support as well. And all I wanted to do was take the company private. The shareholders would have gotten a premium. This company shouldn't have been public at the time because some of you might have heard of Sarbanes-Oxley, which is the accounting standards that they put in place after Enron blew up. And it just was costing us several $1 million a year just to be public and just wasn't worth it. So I wanted to take it private. They felt differently, or some of the board members, and then I'm out. And I just really had a hard time reconciling. And I had a private equity firm who wanted to buy the company. So I started working with them, and that's how the litigation started. And instead of absorbing and accepting the reality, I fought it. And that fight was really just difficult. I mean,
Mhm.
it's difficult to fight a public company who you own a significant piece in, who uses essentially your money to fight you back, and you're using your own cash, and just how unpleasant it was to be in litigation, and um, and that was all my choice because I was the plaintiff, and uh, and I just wouldn't pull the plug because I'm a bulldog in that sense. I'm very determined, and I'll work 24/7 for something, no matter what. So that was, I would say, the most difficult episode that I've ever had.
And then getting through it was, I think you mentioned it, it brought angst to your marriage, understandably.
Yep.
But to ensure that you coped in those times, and again didn't revert to unproductive behaviors or habits. And I'm not presumptuous. Maybe you did engage with something to numb your pains, but the fact that you came out the other side still alive and breathing and well, there are times where folks have suicidal ideations in those moments, and
Sure.
sadly act on them. Was did you have a mentor? Did you have a coach? Did you have a friend? Did you rely on community? Did you listen to motivational type of podcasts or books or audio? Was there something that you can recall from those moments? And the reason I asked, Don, just for a little bit of context, is I'm wanting to provide our listeners maybe something tangible if they're going through a difficult time.
Yeah, I wish I could tell you I found comfort in some things. I wasn't open-minded enough for that. So my friends all reinforced my path, whether they believed that or not. My wife was very supportive, and I think genuinely supportive, saying this is, you can't let this stand. This, it's just wrong. And um, my bearing in the work of litigating and raising money to buy out the company and doing a proxy fight and all that stuff just occupied all my time. So I didn't allow myself to really sit back and reflect like I should have, when I could have gotten the perspective, hey man, this is crazy. What are you doing? Um,
Mhm.
Days and months and years ultimately keep ticking along, and what are you doing here? And so I just think immersing myself in work, which I guess is better than drugs or alcohol, which I didn't do. I mean,
For
didn't
sure.
do excess. It was just the work, but it was very unpleasant,
Mhm.
honestly, until one day, I don't know what triggered it. It was like, I got to stop this.
Yeah.
It was after they declared bankruptcy, and this is crazy. This going in litigation with a bankrupt company is pointless because it's all frozen. The bankruptcy court stops any plaintiff.
Yeah.
So, and it was a big relief when I did. But I wish for your listeners' sake I could say eat 3 apples and take vitamin C, and then
Yeah.
listen to Mindful Journeys podcasts and subscribe to their sessions and whatever, and it's all done. And maybe that's what you could do, but that's not what I did. I just buried myself in work until one day I somehow got the light.
Yeah. Well, no, I appreciate the transparency. That's great, great context, and you've been unbelievable all throughout. So humbly sharing, so openly sharing, and have been amazing, Don. I've got one last question for you, and this is really just to close and culminate this experience with some hope and optimism for the listeners. I know that you brought a ton of value today to me personally, and I trust those who are listening and will listen. But if there's someone who's hearing your voice today and they're saying, "Wow, this guy, he's courageous. He got through this, and yeah, I'm encouraged and I'm inspired." But Don, you just don't get it. I'm going through a divorce right now. I just came out to the parking lot and have a flat tire. I'm dealing with this addiction, right? I'm frustrated. Life has kicked me down. What is your message to that person right now who's listening and they feel that they are at their wits' end?
Yeah, we've all been there, and the first message would be just to accept the reality of your situation. Again, whether it's fair or not, whether it just something you did or something was done to you, accept the reality with all its unpleasantness of what it feels like and what the path forward is, and not fight that. So you have a clear picture. And then try to just be at peace with that reality, with the notion there's a reason this is happening. And there is. I know it. I don't know what that person's reason is, but it will work out if you then work hard, you take initiative of whatever your path forward is, are kind to people and not resentful. It will work out. And I just urge your listeners to be at peace with that, because it is what my life has experienced. And I'm at more peace now than I've ever been because I don't fight reality. But again, I control my work ethic. I control how I treat others. I control the initiatives I take. And that's a great thing. You have the capacity to turn anything around because you're in
Mhm.
control. Once you feel a victim, being a victim or something else, then you lose control because it's someone else's fault. It's not. Ultimately, it's you, and it will work out, and it will work out in a better way than you've ever been if you let the process play out.
Yes, fantastic and powerful, powerful way to close. Where can we find the book? Where on Amazon, in a Barnes and Noble? Tell us about it, and then also I've already shared in advance Don Kurz author .com. But any
Yes.
way we can reach you and where to engage with you.
Well, uh, thank you. Yeah, you can get the book on Amazon or barnesandnoble.com, any electronic or e-commerce site, and it's in various bookstores, but that I don't know which ones it would be in physical bookstores because the book's about 2 months been out. The audio book will come out in about a month, and it's
Exciting.
available Kindle, paperback, hardcover. Again, Amazon, barnesandnoble.com, and Don Kurz author, DONKURZ author.com has some fun stuff in it. And anyone's welcome to get in contact with me via LinkedIn or via email. My personal email is donkurz@gmail.com. And I love interacting. I wrote the book to help people, as corny as that sounds, and when people reach out, I welcome it.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much, Don. Again, I'm grateful for your time today. I'll follow up with you offline, and I look forward to our paths crossing in person in the future and hopefully having more conversations to come.
Well, thanks for having me. I love the insightful questions and the back and forth dialogue. I benefited quite a bit as well. So thank you.
Likewise, thank you, Don. I hope that when you get off today, there's nothing in your gut saying, "Well, I don't know about that, Adam," because I know that I won't be. But
My gut is all green right now. So and it would have
awesome.
already told me. It would have already told me.
Awesome. Very good. Well, have a great day. And again, for those here, have a great day as well. Thanks for being here. Take care, everyone. Take care, Don.
Thank you, Adam. Thank you
See
very
you.
much. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.